The morning sun spilled across the rugged peaks, brushing the mountainside with gold. From the wide balcony of her mansion, Rosalind Hale sipped her coffee and admired the view. The house, built of stone and cedar, stood proudly on the ridge like a crown. She had poured her heart and fortune into every detail: the carved oak doors, the cascading windows that captured the valley below, the terraced gardens that bloomed even in thin mountain air. To Rosalind, it wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of triumph, years of toil rewarded, a fortress of peace away from the politics and noise of the city. She was about to set down her cup when a faint rumble broke the silence. A delivery truck wound its way up the steep drive. At first, she expected groceries or supplies, but as the driver stepped out, her stomach tightened. The man wore the navy jacket of the Homeowners Association courier. Rosalind had dealt with them before, mostly minor annoyances, letters about permitted colors, for shutters, or fines for a gardener's van parked too long in her driveway. Still, she had always paid little attention. After all, what power could a neighborhood committee truly hold over her estate? The courier handed her a thick envelope. "Urgent. Certified delivery," he said. His eyes flickered with unease, as if he knew what was inside. Rosalind signed, thanked him curtly, and waited until he drove off before tearing it open. The letter was pages long, printed in cold, bureaucratic language. It accused her of unpaid HOA fees stretching back years, charges for road maintenance, community lighting, even a penalty for non-compliant landscaping. She frowned. She had receipts for most of these expenses. Others she had never even been billed for. But at the bottom, bold and underlined, were the words that made her grip tighten. "Pay in full within 14 days or face property action." Her heart pounded. She read it again, slower. The HOA claimed she owed tens of thousands of dollars. 14 days. No mention of appeal, no instructions to contest. Only a threat. Rosalind dropped the letter on the oak table and paced the balcony. She had faced far greater battles: corporate boards, political rivals, international investors, but there was something chilling in the arrogance of this notice. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. She opened her laptop and scrolled through old correspondence. Sure enough, buried in her inbox were reminders, but they were vague, inconsistent. Some months she had been billed double, others not at all. The HOA treasurer had ignored her emails seeking clarification. Now, instead of dialogue, they had jumped straight to ultimatum. The mountain air felt suddenly colder. Rosalind's gaze swept over the sprawling gardens, the glistening glass of her mansion. Could they really touch this? Could they, a committee of suburban busybodies, threaten to strip her of what she had built with her own hands and vision? Her phone buzzed. A message from her neighbor. "Did you get the notice too?" "They're serious this time." Rosalind clenched her jaw. Serious. They had no idea how serious she could be. The dawn broke sharp and cold, the mountain air carrying a crisp bite as mist curled through the pines. Rosalind was awakened not by birdsong, but by the low, mechanical growl of engines. At first, still half dreaming, she thought perhaps it was logging trucks passing in the distance. But the sound grew louder, closer, unyielding. She threw on a robe, hurried to the balcony, and froze. Crawling up the winding mountain road was a convoy of heavy equipment: bulldozers, backhoes, trucks hauling debris containers. Behind them trailed SUVs bearing the HOA's insignia. The rising sun glinted off the machinery's steel claws like weapons in a siege. Rosalind's blood ran cold. No, they wouldn't dare. But they would. By the time she rushed downstairs and flung open the front door, a crew in reflective vests was already spilling onto her driveway. A short, sharp-faced man stepped forward: Clinton Marks, the HOA president. His smug smile looked carved in stone. "Mrs. Hale," he called, adjusting his clipboard. "As per the notice, today we're commencing recovery action on unpaid fees. You've been given sufficient warning." Rosalind marched toward him, fury tightening every step. "Recovery action? You mean trespass?" You have no legal right to be here. I've contested every single one of those charges. This is theft. Marks didn't flinch. He merely tapped the papers on his board. Court order. You had your chance. You ignored it. Now the property reverts until dues are settled. Gentlemen. He motioned to the operators. Engines roared. Rosalind's voice cut through the chaos. You so much as scratch a stone on this house and you'll answer for it in court, in the press, everywhere. Do you know who I am? But her words were drowned by the thunder of machines. A bulldozer's blade slammed into the garden wall, reducing years of hand-laid stone to rubble in seconds. Dust plumed into the sky. Workers swarmed like ants, pulling down fencing, marking beams with bright spray paint. Rosalind's chest ached as if something inside her was being torn apart with the walls. She rushed to the steps of her mansion, planting herself in front of the oak doors. This is my land. You'll have to drag me off it. Two security men moved forward, hesitant but firm. They stopped short of touching her, aware of the weight of laying hands on a woman of her stature. Marks narrowed his eyes. Stand aside, Mrs. Hale. Don't make this harder. The first shatter of glass rang out behind her as an excavator's arm punched through the sunroom windows. The sound was deafening, final. Memories flashed with every strike. The laughter of her family in those rooms, late nights drafting speeches by the fireplace, the solitude she had carved out of chaos. Now splintered under machines, like none of it had ever mattered. Neighbors gathered at a distance, drawn by the noise. Some gasped, some whispered, but none dared intervene. To them, it looked official, lawful, even inevitable. Rosalind stood trembling on the steps, dust coating her robe, fury burning hotter than grief. The Hoa thought they had crushed her home. What they didn't realize was that they had only awakened the storm inside her. By evening, the mountain that once gleamed with cedar and stone lay scarred. Where Rosalind's mansion had stood, only piles of shattered timber, twisted glass, and clouds of choking dust remained. The Hoa crew packed up their equipment with the efficiency of vultures finished with a carcass, leaving behind silence broken only by the crackle of settling rubble. Rosalind stood barefoot in the ruins, her robe streaked with dirt, her hair tangled by the wind. She should have felt broken, her home, her sanctuary, reduced to nothing in a single day. Yet as she watched the bulldozers vanish down the road, a slow, burning clarity took hold. They had humiliated her, yes. They had robbed her of her peace. But they had also made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated her. Her phone buzzed endlessly with calls and messages. Neighbors, journalists, colleagues, all had heard whispers. The story of the Hoa demolition was spreading faster than wildfire. Local reporters wanted statements. Friends sent condolences. Enemies sent smirking texts, half pitying, half gloating. Rosalind ignored them all. She didn't need pity, and she certainly didn't need validation. What she needed was strategy. Inside the shell of what had been her office, she set up a folding chair on a patch of stone that hadn't crumbled. From a satchel she salvaged her laptop, miraculously spared. Fingers flying across the keyboard, she pulled up legal statutes, Hoa bylaws, and property codes. Every line she read only fueled her anger. The Hoa had not only acted outside its authority, they had weaponized bureaucracy, twisting loopholes until theft looked like justice. But Rosalind was no ordinary homeowner. She had been a lawyer once. She had sat on boards, advised governors, and written legislation herself. If the Hoa wanted to play with power, they were children toying with matches compared to the fire she could unleash. As night fell, she drafted her first letters, not to the HOA, but to the press. Carefully worded statements that painted the demolition not as a private dispute, but as an outrageous abuse of authority. She included photos of the wreckage, of Marks smirking as bulldozers roared behind him. She framed it as a story of ordinary homeowners everywhere. If they could destroy her mansion over fees, what chance did anyone else have? By midnight, the headlines were already live. Mountain mansion razed by Hoa over unpaid dues, property rights or power grab. Hale vows justice after home demolished. But media pressure was only one front. Rosalind opened a locked folder on her laptop, pulling up documents few people knew she still kept, contacts in the state legislature, correspondence with attorneys general, allies in both political parties. She had influence that stretched beyond this mountain, beyond this county. She poured a glass of whiskey, raised it toward the ruins silhouetted in moonlight, and whispered, "You thought you broke me. You just gave me the weapon I needed." Her mansion could be rebuilt. Her reputation could recover. But for the HOA, for Clinton Marks and his cronies, there would be no recovery. 2 weeks later, the mountain looked eerily quiet. The rubble of Rosalind's mansion still sat untouched, cordoned off with cheap plastic tape by the HOA, as if the ruins were a trophy. But by now, the HOA's smug victory had begun to unravel. The story had exploded across national news. Editorials condemned the HOA as tyrants. Talk shows mocked them. Protesters marched in nearby towns with signs reading, "Fees does not equal foreclosure," and "Stop HOA tyranny." Even state officials were forced to comment. The HOA board, once so confident, found themselves under siege. Yet Clinton Marks kept insisting their actions were lawful, waving papers that seemed thinner and weaker each time they were scrutinized. Rosalind watched it all unfold with calculated patience. She didn't rush to court, nor did she beg for compensation. She knew a simple lawsuit wouldn't be enough. Money could rebuild walls, but what she wanted was retribution written into the very soil. One gray morning, she arrived at the state capitol in a sharp black suit, not the disheveled woman who had stood weeping in dust. Security guards straightened as she walked past. In the governor's private chambers, she laid out her proposal to a circle of legislators and allies, a redrawing of district lines. It was a maneuver few had dared attempt, using state authority to dissolve the HOA's charter by restructuring its jurisdiction. With one pen stroke, the HOA's governing district would cease to exist, its powers transferred to the county. Every covenant, every bylaw, every ounce of authority Clinton Marks had wielded would vanish like smoke. Some in the room hesitated. "This is extreme," one senator warned. "You're talking about erasing an entire association." Rosalind met his eyes, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Extreme is bulldozing a citizen's home without due process. Extreme is an unelected board, wielding power greater than the courts. They wanted war. Now they'll have the consequences." The vote passed, quietly at first, then with swelling support as news of the measure leaked. By the end of the week, the governor signed it into law. The HOA that had leveled Rosalind's mansion no longer existed on paper. Its bank accounts were frozen, its members stripped of office. Clinton Marks himself was summoned to hearings, his smirk gone, his name dragged through headlines as the face of arrogance and abuse. That weekend, Rosalind returned to her mountain. She stood on the same ridge where her balcony once stretched, the ruins still scarred and silent. This time, she wasn't trembling. She wasn't broken. She was victorious. The map itself had been redrawn because of her, the HOA's district wiped clean as if it had never been there. She inhaled the thin mountain air, letting it fill her lungs. Around her, the land was quiet, waiting. She imagined new walls rising, stronger than before, built not just of stone but of defiance. They thought they had destroyed her life. Instead, they had made her a legend. Rosalind smiled, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Now," she whispered, "we rebuild. On my terms."